Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Sam's33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff, mix-up. And today we've got a not exactly rogue deck. It's kind of known in the metagame, and it's done alright, and that's Darkrai Hydreigon. I realized that I haven't done a mix-up video or any Pokemon video in quite a while, and I apologize for that, but I really wanted to test this deck as much as I could before making this video. And after 4 weeks and like a day, I think, this is probably going to be delayed a day. But anyway, after 4 weeks, I think I'm due for another one. So yeah, Darkrai Hydreigon, I have definitely worked on this more than some of my other decks, and I definitely think this video is much more prepared than my last one, where like half the thing was like, oh, I didn't test this, sorry. Well, that's not exactly happening this time. Definitely not to the same extent, but anyway. Let's just start off with the video and get down to the part you actually care about. You know, who cares about this stuff? No one. No one. No one. So, Darkrai Hydreigon. Man, has it been a while since I've talked about this deck. The last time this deck was considered good was back in fall of 2012. Since then, the only success it's had was in the Klasinski Open, where Xander Perot, a senior player, took it to top 8 in the 15 and above event. Let's take a look at the main premise of the deck for those of you who were too young, so to speak, to remember this deck. Hydreigon is a stage 2 with the ability Dark Trance, which allows you to move your dark energies from any of your Pokemon to another of your Pokemon. A very common concept in the TCG, especially in this current format, because of the amazing Max Potion, which allows you to heal all of the damage from one of your Pokemon and discard all the energy attached to it. With Dark Trance, you can simply move the energy off your Pokemon before healing them, and never have to deal with the downsides of Max Potion. It also has an attack called Dragon Blast, which does 140 for 2 Dark, 1 Psychic, and 1 Colorless, and you discard 2 Darks from Hydreigon. The Psychic energy may make it seem like it's not usable in the deck, but the deck runs 4 Blend Energy GFPD, so the Psychic energy isn't an issue. It's definitely a good attack, especially after the 30 damage from Darkrai's Night Spear, which can allow you to knock out 170 HP Pokemon in one hit. Obviously, you should all know Darkrai by now. Its Dark Cloak ability is better in this deck than it ever has been, since you can move your Dark energies to your active Pokemon, retreat it, then move the energies off them to use it on your new active Pokemon. The big weakness of this concept is Pokemon that can one-shot your Pokemon. If they can do that, you'll never get a chance to Max Potion your Pokemon, and you'll have no energies and lose. So the question on everyone's mind is, what has this deck gained? Well, Virizion EX is a really nice card in this deck. It protects your Pokemon with Blend Energy on them from special conditions, which when trying to avoid one-hit knockouts is very useful. Silver Bangle is another fun card for this deck, since it gives Dragon Blast enough power to knock out a ton of different EXs, like Keldeo, Deoxys, Thundurus, pretty much anything but Darkrai. Black Kyurem is weak to Dragon anyway. For tech cards, the obvious new one is Absol, one of the best non-EX attackers, and it's pretty much the only one that uses Dark Energy. There's Azelf to move special energy around, and Victini EX or Entei EX to take care of Virgin. Victini EX is good to accelerate energy in the early game, but Entei has much higher HP. Other than that, you have all the old techs to work with as well. Shaman, Sigilyph, Mewtwo, Giratina, Cresselia, pretty much any basic you can think of that uses Dark, Grass, Psychic, or Fire energy. Now that we're done looking at the core cards of the deck, let's take a look at the list for the deck. The first list is the super simplified list with just Darkrai, Sableye, and Hydreigon. And maybe 2 Virizion and 1 Absol, but that's beside the point. Other than a lone Dino, you have no worry of starting with an unwanted Pokemon, especially Shaman. Ugh. Anyway, here's the list. Sableye is such a strong starter for this deck. It helps you recycle Ultra Balls and Rare Candies to set up Hydreigon, as well as trainers like Pokemon Catcher and Max Potion you are forced to discard from Professor Juniper or Ultra Ball. It's also great if you only happen to have 1 energy in play. The deck doesn't quite have the consistency to use Junk Hunt if it doesn't happen to start with Sableye, so I kinda gave up on trying to start with it, and space was tight, so that's why there's only 2. 2 Virizion is purely for consistency. With only 1, I don't find myself drawing it very often. It also has that great water resistance, which lets it take a hit from Kyurem if you're having problems keeping energy in play. While Absol may have 2 low HP for this deck, it does only take 2 energy, so losing it isn't that big a deal. And it sure packs a punch for just 2 energy. It can deal 100, 120, or even 140 with a Dark Claw. The proof of this card's power is in the numbers, my friends. Deciding which Dino to play is a tough one. The Dark type 1 has the worst weakness, the worst attack, but you can use Dark Patch to it, which can be nice when you don't have a Darkrai in play quite yet. The Dragon type 1 has a good weakness, an attack that can paralyze your opponent if you flip heads, but you can't Dark Patch to it. Overall, I think the Dragon one is the better play, but neither one is going to win you games. Well, not many at least. For our supporters, we have 4N, pretty standard, 3 Juniper. No, that's not a typo. Deck's resources are so precious that using Juniper a lot of the time is too painful. Just look at these card counts. 3 Catcher, 3 Dark Patch, 3 Max Potion. You just can't afford to discard this stuff. Even with Sableye, usually it's too painful. I had this same philosophy when I played Kling Klang back in States of 2013, and look how that turned out. 2 Skyla, with so many powerful items in this deck at low counts, getting just 1 can really be effective a lot of the time. 2 Colress, the deck definitely has a lot of Pokemon on the bench most of the time, so it fits just fine with this deck. Random Receiver and Sableye have always gone well together, so why stop now? The single Dark Claw is nice for certain Pokemon. Against anything with 170 HP, for both Darkrai and Absol, that extra 20 is super good. 130 HP is another number Dark Claw helps against. If your opponent has 2 Pokemon with 130 HP in play, you can use Night Spear with the Dark Claw to do 110 to one of them, and 30 to the other. Then next turn, Catcher the other and knock both out, assuming you still have the Dark Claw. If your opponent has a full bench, Mind Jack with the Dark Claw does 140, a good number with the 30 damage from Night Spear and against 130 HP Pokemon. I think I'm starting to repeat myself. Going up to 2 Dark Claw would be nice, but I can't really find the space. Tool Scrapper is a really powerful card with Sableye, Dowsing Machine, or even by itself. Being able to reuse it against Garbodor is really strong in that matchup, or even against decks that rely heavily on Floatstone. Silver Bangle is also a pain for this deck, since it helps a lot of Pokemon kill your Pokemon in one hit. Don't worry, Tool Scrapper is here to save the day! Remember what I said about resources being scarce for this deck? Well, Dowsing Machine can help you out. Any one card you just so happen to need more of in a particular game can be gotten back with Dowsing Machine. In decks like this, it's always my ace-spec of choice. Now time for the results. The deck definitely isn't the greatest thing in the world. It's pretty slow to set up, and most decks have a way to knock out your Pokemon in one hit, which pretty much ruins the deck strategy. The thing I did like about the deck was its options. Dragon Blast and Mind Jack are powerful enough to clean up a few games that Night Spear can't quite do. Overall, I don't think this list will do great in tournaments, but that doesn't mean the other lists we're going to look at won't. Now, we're going to try adding some tech cards to the deck. With so many options to choose from, I wasn't able to use all of them, but I've used quite a few. Here's the ones that stood up to the test. The ones that I've tried that didn't live up were Sigilyph and Azelf. Azelf is hard to pull off pretty much all the time, since if you have 3 energy in play to use Side Jamming, you're probably not in a bad enough position to actually use it, and if you ever pull it off, you're just going to get hit by a Helix Force and lose all your energy. Sigilyph has a similar problem. If you decide to use it, it's so easy to kill with either Kyurem, Absol, Blastoise, or if Garbodor comes into play, and you lose all your energy. Nowadays, pretty much every deck has an easy counter to it, so it's really not worth it. As for the techs that did make it, there is Shaymin EX, which is a really nice late game attacker. Revenge Blast does 30 damage plus 30 for each prize your opponent has taken. When your opponent has taken 5 prizes, you can do enough to knock out any EX in one hit. Even if they've only taken 4 prizes, that's enough to knock out a Kyurem, or an EX you've previously hit with Night Spear's 30 damage. Even if they've only taken 4 prizes, that's enough to knock out a Kyurem, or an EX if you've hit it with Night Spear's 30 damage previously. If you can time this well with an N, this card can win you more than a couple of games. Next we have Victini EX. This card absolutely crushes Brazion Genesect. Like, seriously, if you get this thing out within the first 4 turns, you've basically won. I personally prefer having Turbo Energize over the extra HP Entei has. It also takes 1 less blend energy to use its attack, which can definitely impact the game sometimes. And finally we have Giratina EX. At first glance, this looks like a bad Black Kyurem EX counter, but it's actually used to counter Plasma Kyurem. It's not Metal type, it doesn't do anything extra against Plasma Pokemon, but it just so happens to be the best basic Pokemon that can do 130 damage. Hydreigon can knock out a Kyurem as well, but that discards energy, whereas Giratina lets you keep them in play. It does discard the top 3 cards of your deck, but I think it's worth it. It's also okay against Black Kyurem, but the Blastoise matchup is so bad I don't think it will matter much. Other than those 3, it's the same as the other list. Overall, I think the techs are a good addition to the deck. Most of your bad matchups are at worst improved. It also makes it a lot more fun to play, that's for sure. From the previous list, I kinda missed Absol as well as Darkclaw and the second Brazion, but I can definitely live without the latter two. Not so much the former. For our final list, we're going to take a slightly different angle on this one. There's a certain something this deck lacks that most decks have. Good matchups? Nah, that's not it. It's that the deck has no way of knocking out EXs in one hit without it having weakness to one of your Pokemon. So it's time to find something that can. Alright, I've completed my search. As for basics that work with Dark and Blend Energy, we have Genesect with G-Booster, and, that's it. Well, I was hoping for a wider selection than that. Well, I guess that will do. The nice thing about that is if you discard 2 Dark Energies with G-Booster, you can simply attach a Dark Energy and play Dark Patch to use it again. The obvious flaw with this is that if your opponent can Tool Scrap your G-Booster, since this deck doesn't have enough room to fit Shadow Triads, or even if your opponent plays Enhanced Tamer, your plans are going to be foiled pretty easily. But regardless of those flaws, I decided to try it on anyway. Here's the deck list. I only had enough room for 1 Genesect, but since it's so situational anyway, I didn't see much wrong with it. Since Dowsing Machine had to be replaced with G-Booster, I added 2 more supporters to make sure the deck kept drawing well. Originally, I only added the 1 supporter, but the deck was having supporter problems anyway, so having another one couldn't hurt. So this is the part of the video where I give up. I mean, didn't have enough time to test the deck before this video's deadline. Yeah, that's it. But from what I have tested, the idea is a bit clunky to execute in an actual game very often, and for every 1 time you actually use it to win a game, there's the other 5 times where you wish G-Booster was Dowsing Machine to grab you the game-winning card. I would stick to one of the other versions. Alright, let's take a look at the matchups for this deck now. Plasma decks are about even to slightly unfavorable, unless you run Giratina, then it's even to slightly favorable. Kyurem being able to one-shot your Darkrai is very irksome, I must say. If they can get 2 Kyurems set up at a time, they pretty much have the game on lockdown. A lot of the time I find myself hiding behind a Virizion EX and using Emerald Slash, since Virizion has that water resistance, then use a Night Spirit to knock it out. Then they just use another Kyurem to knock out my Darkrai. Giratina and Hydreigon can KO a Kyurem in 1 hit, so if you can get 1 turn where you knock out a Kyurem and they can't knock out your Giratina or Hydreigon, you can knock out another Kyurem, and then capture the rest of the ones they try to power up. Any low energy attacks followed by a Night Spear can be good against Kyurems, as well as Absol with Dark Claw, as long as your opponent's bench is full. Overall, this matchup is winnable, but it can go bad very easily. Straight Darkrai is a favorable matchup. You're just a little slower to set up than they are, and you can just max potion their damage off. Enhanced Tamer is a good card for them to use in the matchup, but if you just don't attach too many, you should be fine. And if you have to, you can let off on one of your max potions to let a Darkrai with a lot of damage on it die, and have them take some Blend Energies along with them. But the problem with that is Blend Energy can stop your opponent's lasers with the blends, so it can kind of be a tricky matchup at times. Overall, this matchup can be a breeze if you draw right, but if you're forced to attach too many Blend Energies early on, you can get in some tight spots. Darkrai Garbodor, on the other hand, is a bad matchup. Hydreigon has a 3 retreat cost, so if you ever have to get one out there, it'll be stuck until you can draw a Tool Scrapper. Speaking of, while Tool Scrapper and Dowsing Machine are the key to winning the matchup, you don't have any way to knock out your opponent's Darkrai's in 1 hit, or any way to get a big turn on those turns where you Tool Scrapper their Garbodor, so it's hard to put yourself in a favorable position when Tool Scrappering their Garbodor. In this matchup, you kinda have to go after Garbodor over anything else, since when they have no Garbodor out, you have the same advantages you have in the straight Darkrai matchup, such as Max Potion and Virizion EX. Again, Enhanced Tamer is a pain, but you only have to worry about it once or twice per game. Maybe 3 or 4 times, but it's still not that bad. Overall, this is not one of my favorite matchups, but it's not unwinnable. Virizion Genesect is your best matchup, easily. The deck is slow, not very powerful, everything has 170 HP, it can't spam Enhanced Tamers, and a single Fire-type tech makes it so favorable it's not even funny. If they pull off a G-Booster or 2, you can be in some trouble, but most of the time, you'll have enough energy in play to have a counter-attack, and any plays they try to set up are ruined by Max Potion. If they manage to get all your Blend Energies in the discard through Enhanced Tamer on knockouts, the Shadow Steel Drifloon can steal, pun intended, the last KO for them. And seriously, Victini beats them to a pulp, unless they run Enhanced Tamer to get rid of your blends on Victini, and Laser to KO it in 1 hit, it's pretty much over for them. Most of Virgin's matchups are fairly even, so if you're expecting a lot of it in your meta, this is probably one of your best deck choices. Blastoise is my candidate for toughest matchup. It's so hard for you to stop their Black Ballista train from happening. If they can take out your Pokemon with all of your energy once or twice, you can't really come back from it. You have 2 options in this matchup. One is to use Dragon Blast to knock out Blastoses, or use Giratina and Shaman to take 4 easy prizes on a Black Kyurem and a Keldeo respectively, and try to use Dragon Blast and Night Spear to take your last 2. The problem with the latter is you're going to run out of blend energies before using all your different Pokemon you want. Giratina needs 2 by itself, then Shaman needs a 3rd, and Dragon Blast needs 1 to use it. No way you're setting up that much in one game. Honestly, this is one of those matchups you just have to hope and pray. For some last minute additions, Suicune Terrakion is good, since you have so many ways to hurt them. Trubbish is a bad matchup, since you're slow and they can wipe all your energy out of play really easily. And Big Basic Garbodor is really bad. Fighting types and Garbodor are the 2 worst possible things for this deck to face. Alright, now that the matchups are over, here are some things I'd like to say before I leave. You definitely shouldn't play Prism Energy. Unless you're playing something that needs a type that's not on the blend energy you're playing. You usually have enough blend energy in play to use any of your techs without Prism Energy, and decks with Enhanced Tamer just wreck your deck even more if you decide to run them. They also can't be moved off a Hydreigon, which makes Dragon Blast much harder to use. Just trust me, don't play them. Time is a big issue. I've played this deck in best out of 3 in a 50-minute time limit, and I often find myself losing on time. Knowing when to scoop games is a valuable skill to have when playing this deck, or any deck really. Even if you know when to scoop, just winning 2 games usually takes over 50 minutes, so you really can't afford to be slow. This deck could definitely need a few more draw cards. I've had a lot of problems with drawing dead, and with a Stage 2 deck, that is a huge problem. I'd like to run Tropical Beach, but the card's so darn expensive I just can't bother with it in any deck. If you draw dead at any point, you're not going to get set up and you're going to lose. Not like Moore's Porters is a bad thing in any deck, but I've been noticing it more so in this deck than most others. There are also a few ideas I've had that I'd like to try out some other time. First is computer search. While Dowsing Machine definitely isn't bad, a lot of the times I'd just rather use a computer search to get the final piece of my Rare Candy Hydreigon combo, or a crucial card I'd like to start continuously junk hunting for, or just to get a tech I really need at the current time. A-specs are always a heavily discussed topic, but computer search seems like the better choice in my Theorymon head. Jirachi EX and Scoop Up Cyclone are another way of adding more consistency to the deck. This way you don't have to add more supporters, since you can just search out Jirachi with Ultra Ball or Level Ball. Scoop Up Cyclone can also serve some uses by itself. If you start with a terrible tech card, like Shaman EX, you can scoop it up and save it for later. It can also work as a max potion by moving energy off of damaged Pokemon, scooping them up, and putting it back down. It can also move a Hydreigon that got stuck on the active because of Garbodor. It really can do quite a bit of things. The last card is a funny little tech card, Sock. You know how I said Brazion can be really useful in the Plasma matchup for doing 50 to a Kyurem, followed by a Night Spear? Well, how about doing that for 1 energy? Seems pretty good, don't it? It's also a nice Absol counter, and a nice starter against Plasma decks in general. I'm starting to like the idea of this card a lot. This deck could use something that does damage for 1 energy. It really makes me want to try Chandelure EX when that comes out. All of these I really want to try out sometime. I just wish I had more time to do it before making this video.
And there you go, that's going to be it for today's mix-up video. Again, sorry for the 4-week delay, but hopefully this episode made up for the 4-week delay. I think it's a good episode. I'm very proud of this one. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Well, before I go. Next episode will probably be on another metagame deck, and it will be a Pocket Monsters, so look forward to that. So, you know, for people who are less experienced with the metagame, you should check out that when it comes out, which will probably be a few weeks, because I haven't tested that deck very much. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Later.